Hey guys, today we are colouring in a new colouring page of mine. So, if you've just stumbled across this video, then hello! I'm Jade, a digital artist and illustrator. A few months ago I started a Patreon where I give you guys different digital and physical rewards. And one of those digital rewards is a monthly themed colouring page. So today we are going to be colouring in this month's colouring page, which you can grab on my Patreon until the end of this month. Let's talk about my colouring supplies. I always use these markers to colour in. They are dual tip markers and they work quite well. I do want to eventually get some alcohol markers as they seem to be good for colouring, but for now these are what I'm using. And for the colouring page itself, I am using my Patreon exclusive printable colouring page for this month, which is themed around 3 cats exploring the water and making some fishy friends. I love making colouring pages now, which is why I added them as a digital reward on my Patreon. So, what is Patreon? It's a subscription-based platform where you can get exclusive content ranging from digital rewards or even physical rewards. A lot of artists use it to show behind the scenes, give you exclusive digital content and even do happy mail. So what do I offer on my Patreon? I have multiple tiers that range from £4.50 to £15, and some rewards you can purchase separately if you don't want to subscribe for the month. I have a digital friends tier where I offer themed monthly wallpapers, both desktop and mobile, a monthly colouring page, this month's being the one we are colouring in today, an exclusive video each month, behind the scenes content, and even a monthly Procreate time-lapse of one of my drawings, either an old or a new one. Then I have 4 different tiers, which include all of the rewards from the digital friends tier, plus either an exclusive sticker, print, bookmark, or combination of all 3. So every month I will create a theme for all of these rewards, this month's theme being underwater cats. So if you would like to colour this page in for yourself, you can swing by my Patreon and grab this printable colouring page to either colour in traditionally or digitally. So let's go through my process of this colouring page. When drawing it originally, I wanted to make sure that the cats had no patterns so that you can decide which type of cats you want them to be when you're colouring in the page yourself. So I first need to decide how I wanted my cats to look, which I decided to colour these 3 cats as a ginger cat, a calico cat and a cream brown cat. This is to match this month's Patreon desktop wallpaper. Then to brighten up the cats that are scuba diving, I added a green to their diving masks. After colouring my characters, I like to move on to any other little characters in the scene, but as there are none except from the fish in this page, I decided to move on to the rocks instead. Right now I am just continuing to add the base colours for these parts and I'll focus on adding the details later on in the process. So for the rocks, I'm just using a very light grey. The next area that I'm going to be focusing on is the corals on the rocks. I'm starting with a green and adding that to 1 coral in each section. Then I follow that up with a pink, orange, yellow and purple for the remaining corals. I made sure that each area only had 1 coral in each colour so that I made the whole page balanced. I wanted to use quite a few colours for the corals as well so that it brought the page to life by adding a lot more colour into it, especially as the cats are just orange, brown and cream. Then for the bushes above the water, I used a very light green to colour them in. For this area I tried to colour it a little bit quicker, so that I could avoid my brush strokes from drying too quickly and then causing streaks. Moving on to all of the little fishies, I chose again to colour these with multiple colours. I did want to do 2 colours for each of their bodies, but I find that these markers can be a little difficult for me to blend them together nicely, so I instead decided to have 1 colour for their body and 1 colour for their fins. The colours that I chose were yellow, red, orange and green. I wanted to use more soft but colourful colours so that they stood out against the different elements on this page. Then I'm going to focus on the ocean floor, this being the sand. I decided to use the light yellow colour as this was the closest I had, and I can then use a darker sandy yellow to add details on the sand later on. Now focusing on the biggest section of this page. Firstly, I am using a light aqua blue colour which will be different from the sky. Now since this is a large section I have to colour in, I make sure to colour it all in at once because I want it to come out looking smooth and even. So when I am colouring, I like to start on one side and work my way across to the other using the brush tip of the marker. I find that the brush tip allows for more flexibility with my colouring, so when there are lots of small areas and details around, I use just the very end of the brush tip to colour, whereas when there are larger sections I like to apply more pressure and use more of the brush to get the most coverage. So I'm just making sure that I cover the area well and trying to avoid having streaking with my brush strokes. Also, this area does have a lot of intersections around the corals that make it a little bit difficult to colour in before the pen dries, but by doing these small areas as I go along, it makes it a lot easier to avoid brush streaks. Now on to adding detail and shadows. I started off by adding details to the bushes above the water. I used a darker shade of green and used a stippling technique, which is basically adding in a bunch of dots to an area. There isn't really any rhyme or reason to where the dots go, I just tried to make them look a bit more natural and less uniform. I did make the bottom of the bush have more dots than the top so that it gives the bushes more dimension and makes it look like there's more leaves at the bottom of the bush. Stippling is a simple way to replicate the look of multiple leaves, as it is a lot harder to draw them individually. I used a couple other greens as well to create depth using the lightest of the colours first. You can also use paint markers as well to add some lighter colours to the bushes, as it is hard to do that with just markers, but for this page I decided to just go with the darker greens. Now moving on to my characters, which to do this I had to determine where my light source was coming from. If there is no clear light source, I usually just pick a direction from which an imaginary one would be in, so in this case I decided that the light was coming from the centre but above. As this page will not have any harsh light highlights, I didn't need to account for them when I was adding in my base colours. So to do the shadows on my characters, I used a mix of darker colours and the same colours that I had originally used for their base colours. So for the oranges and creams I used the same colour as their base colours, and then for the browns I used a darker brown for the shadows. It's good to keep in mind that you can layer markers to create shadows and depth with the same colour once the first layer has dried. And this is a big reason why I like using markers to colour with. I do want to eventually get some alcohol markers, as I have said previously, which are a lot nicer for layering, but these will do for now. So now moving back to the corals to add all of their shadows. I mostly used the same colours as the base colours for each of the corals. This was so that it was a lot easier to add their shadows. With the shadows on these corals, I more added them to the outside of the shapes so they added dimension with them and making them kind of look curved. However, with this coral, I made it look like a tube coral. This was by adding circles to the top of the coral, which then mimics little holes. With the rocks, I was a bit unsure how to colour them, especially as I didn't want to add any dark colours that would overpower the whole page. So I decided to use the same grey as I used for the base colour and then layer that colour in 2 places. This then created 3 areas, 1 of light bouncing off the rock and then 2 of shadows. We are nearly at the end, and with almost all of the areas coloured and shadows added, the only areas left to do is the water, the sand and the sky. So let's start with the water. For this section I was a bit unsure on how to make it look like water, but I ended up doing big blob shapes across all of the water using a slightly darker blue than what I used for the base colour of the water. There wasn't really any rhyme or reason to these shapes, I just made them not too close together but big enough to cover a lot of the space. Once all of the area was covered in these shapes, I then took a darker blue and again made blobs across the water, this time focusing on keeping them in the larger shapes that I had just previously drawn. This will then create the look and texture of water while adding some more detail across the whole page. Moving on to the sand, I am just using the same yellow as the base colour again to add basic shadows around the rocks and to the sand itself. Then I'm going in with a slightly darker sandy yellow and using the same stippling effect that I used for the bushes earlier to create the effect of little grains of sand. This is the easiest way to create this effect because it would be difficult to draw each bit of sand separately. For this part I did only use 1 type of yellow for the dots, but you can use more than one if you want to create more depth. Finally, the last part that I am adding to this page is white clouds to the sky. I am using a white acrylic paint pen and drawing basic cloud shapes across the sky, starting from the left side and working my way across to the right side. I did have to add a few layers to my clouds as my white pen is slowly running out and I wanted the clouds to stand out in the sky. Then I'm just adding little bubbles around both the cats and the fish in the water using a white gel pen. I find that this pen is great for little details that my acrylic pen is too big for. If you've made it this far and would like to colour this page yourself, head over to my Patreon to join my digital friends tier or purchase the digital download separately. If you join the tier, you will also get access to all of my previous month's colouring pages, including a Space Cat adventure, a Ducky garden party, and even a little dragon library trip, and a whole load of other rewards too. I'd love to have you join our little adventure over there. And with that, the page is complete. I had a lot of fun colouring this page with you today, so thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Bye!